Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today we're going to talk about some fantasy standalones. I know that I can be a little bit of a series nerd. I love big chunky fantasy books with multiple books in a series. I love diving into a world for a very, very long time. But I understand that some people do not want to commit as much time to a story as that. And so I wanted to give you guys some recommendations that are just one and done books that are still just amazing worlds and amazing stories that have fantasy elements in them. And then also talk to you guys about some fantasy standalones that I have on my own TBR. All of the books on this recommendation list are between 4 and 5 stars, and some of them have more fantasy than others. So the first book that I want to talk to you guys about is Wayward. This is a book that came out this year. It's been pretty popular, and if you haven't heard me talk about it, I think I talked about it in a couple of different videos. This is a book where you have 3 different timelines, and there are 3 different women, one of which is in the 1600s maybe? I think it was the 1600s, and she has been put on trial for being a witch. And you are walking through her life during that time. And then the other 2 are more modern day. One is actually in present day, and then one I think is in the 1940s, if I remember correctly. And all of these women are connected to each other in some way. The, I think, main storyline is the modern day girl. I can't remember her name, but she is going through some pretty abusive situations in her relationship and is looking for an escape, and goes to this cottage, which is called Wayward Cottage, and to kind of escape that situation, and you learn more about her history through that. This, I would say, is minimal on fantasy. There are definitely fantasy elements, and you are dealing with like a witchy storyline, but that is not the focus of the story. The focus of the story is more relationships and dealing with trauma and kind of coming to love yourself and things like that, I think is the main storyline. I really did enjoy this, but it is not for someone who is looking for a lot of like witchy magic or anything like that. It does not have that in it. The next book, I'm sure you aren't surprised that I put it on this list, and that is The Magician's Daughter. I am going to sing this book's praises until I have more people that read it, because I need to be able to talk to people about it. This is a story featuring Biddy, who is a girl who lives on a magical island, and she has lived there for her entire life. She lives with a magician named Rowan and his familiar, whose name is Hutchincroft. And she's I think a older teenager maybe. I can't remember exactly how old she is, but she is becoming more independent, and she would like to go off of the island, and Rowan absolutely does not want her to do that. He forbids her to do that. He leaves the island every night to bring back supplies, and one night he does not come home. And so Biddy has to make a decision about whether or not to go after him, how to help him, and she ends up entering this other world, or like not other world, but like she ends up exiting like her safe little life in order to help Rowan. And the world is really interesting because where Biddy's island has magic, most of the world does not. Magic is a very rare commodity, and it's only provided to the very, very privileged. And so when she sees this other world, she gets to see the turmoil that has caused for people to not have access to magic, and gets to see kind of the political side of things. The characters in this book are just absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely loved Hutchincroft's character, and the relationship between him and Rowan is really sweet as well. I want to reread this book. I'm going to wait until next year probably to do that, but I really enjoyed it. The next book is definitely lighter on the fantasy, but there are definitely fantasy elements, and that is When Women Were Dragons. This book features a main character who I'm not going to be able to remember this name because I read this, I think last year. It might have been at the very beginning of this year, but I'm pretty sure it was last year. And this is centered in a world where women have literally become dragons. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And it is centered around female rage, and there are certain women who have stayed in their family, and it's about society's shift to have to deal with all of these families that are no longer have mothers or grandmothers or a matriarch in their family. And then you follow your main character who has I don't know how much I want to give away, because I don't know how much is like not a spoiler since I haven't read it in a while. There are people in her life, women in her life, who have become dragons, and she is having to take care of a younger relative and become kind of the caretaker in that person's life. And it's about her growing up and the difficulties that she sees and kind of the negative connotation that society has on these women who have become dragons, and kind of discussions along that line with women's choice to be free and things like that. I really appreciated this book for the social commentary that it has. I, though, wish I would have known going in that it was not super heavy on the fantasy. Yes, women do become dragons, so obviously there is a fantastical element, but that is not the focus. You do not focus on the dragons in the story. There are like some that get pulled into the storyline and you spend time with them, but it's less about dragons and dragon lore than it is the connotation of what would happen to the world if women walked away. So I really did enjoy it, but just go into it knowing that it's not like a full-blown fantasy novel. Next is a very cozy fantasy read, and that is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This book features, I think her name is Micah Moon. I'm very impressed if I actually remembered that correctly, who gets an ad, I think it's in the newspaper, for a job to take care of three witches. And she is a witch herself. In this world, witches are not to gather together because essentially the magic gathers around the people who know how to use it. And so it's very dangerous for witches to come together all the time. And magic is definitely something that is hidden from the world. Witches do not want anyone to know that they are witches. And so Micah decides to look at this ad and go to this location where these three witches are living together, these three very young witches. And it is not something that typically happens. You don't raise witches together because of the fact that it can go a little haywire with magic. And so she has to figure out how to handle the situation in a proper way, in a safe way, and also how to get these girls some help. And it's very cute. There's a romance in it. The found family elements of this were just absolutely lovely. And yeah, if you're looking for a pick-me-up, I would say this is probably the book on this list you should pick up. The next recommendation is Warrior of the Wild. This is a Tricia Levenseller whose books are very nostalgic for me. Not because I read them when I was younger, but they just have that feel. When you read them, they feel like coming home. It's odd how a lot of the books I've read by her just kind of feel that way. This book features a main character who is living in, they're kind of like Viking villages. Viking's not the right word because they're not on the sea, but they're villages that are kind of separated by caste. So you have like a warrior caste, and you have, that's the main village that you're in. And then you have some other castes that are like harvesters and stuff like that around in this forest area. And in her village, the warriors have a trial that you have to go through. And I think all of the villages have the trial. Hers is just a little different because of where she lives. And she is thought to become the next head of the village. And she's been raised to be the next head of the village. There's never been any question that she's going to pass this test, but something goes horribly wrong, and she fails the test, and she has to go through a challenge in order to be accepted back into the village. So after failing the test, you are given like it's a quest. I can't remember exactly what they called it in the book, but they tell you have to to do this thing. It's usually a very challenging thing, and if you don't do it, you are abandoned into the forest and you have to live by yourself. None of the other villages in the area will take you in. You're kind of on your own. And her quest is very, very challenging, one that is essentially impossible for her to complete. And so she has to go through the impossible. And there are other characters that she meets along the way that have also been abandoned by their villages and have their own quests that they have to go through. And so it is their journey, and once again, found family. It's very light. Even though it's a harsh environment, there are very scary things that happen in this forest, and there is a god, I guess, that is living amongst the village and kind of, I don't want to say terrorizing the village, but like demanding certain things from the village that they have to deal with as well. And I just really enjoyed this story. It was probably on this list the second most cozy read, just because it does have some violent elements in it with the fighting that goes on in the forest, but it's still the relationships and the character building that Tricia Levenseller does in this story is just fantastic. It warms my heart. The last recommendation that I have for you guys is Kaikai, and this is a story that was very popular last year. But I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it recently, and I don't want it to go by the wayside because I really do think that this was an amazing story, and I would like to see more stories like this from this author. This story features Kaikai, who is a princess in a realm. I can't remember how many brothers she has, but I think she's the only girl in her family. And she grows up learning about the gods in her land and how they've helped her people and how they essentially decide destinies for people and things like that. And something happens in her life, and her mother gets pushed out of the kingdom, and her world kind of gets turned upside down. She is forced into a situation where she is going to essentially be, for lack of a better word, sold to make an alliance with another kingdom, sold into marriage. I guess I should say that, not sold as a slave, but and that's not what she wanted for herself. In the midst of all of this, she discovers that she has a magic where she can, I don't know how much to give away about that. Her magic, she can manipulate emotions and relationships, or like what people do with their relationship with her and because of their relationship with her. And she kind of has to navigate doing that. And this storyline, she wants to be independent. She also wants to do what's best, but what's best doesn't always match like what other people around her believe. There's a line in the synopsis that I want to read you guys that I think kind of sums it up. It says, "But as the evil from her childhood stories threatens the cosmic order, the path she has forged clashes with the destiny the gods have chosen for her family. And Kaikai must decide if resistance is worth the destruction it will wreak, and what legacy she intends to leave behind." I think the story, that line, the last line, what legacy she's going to leave behind, is really what you see throughout the story, the building, the culmination of what legacy she wants to leave, battling with her choices and who it affects. And this story is heartbreaking. Some of the things that happen to Kaikai will make you mad. But I really enjoyed the storyline. I believe that this is involving some characters that are in, is it in Indian lore? There is some type of, I don't want to give the wrong location, but there are some stories that are mythology related, that are related to this storyline. And I believe that in that original mythology, maybe Kai was a villain, and so you get to see her perspective of everything that happens to her in this storyline, I think, is where the original story came from. It's been a while since I've read it, but it was amazing. And if you like mythology retellings, if you like, I don't want to call this a coming of age story, but it kind of is, I would say definitely give this a try. On to the 6 books that I plan on reading. I do not know as much detail about these books as I did about the ones I've read because I have not currently read them, but I am really excited about them. So the first is The Remarkable Retirement of Edna Fischer. This is on my 5-star predictions list. It's about an 83-year-old woman who is the chosen one in this storyline, and she has to fight off a dragon rider in order to save some knights. And I just think it sounds fantastic. It sounds funny, and I think it's kind of it tips, you know, the original Chosen One fantasy story on its head. So I'm excited to see what this one brings. The second book is Perilous Times, which is a King Arthur retelling. I believe it's one of the Knights of the Round Table that is chosen to essentially be reborn over and over and over again to be kind of the protector of the realm, and he ends up getting reborn in modern times and has to deal with all these differences in societal norms and culture that is kind of a little bit of a shock. I believe that some of this book is satire, but I'm excited to read it. I don't know that I've ever read a King Arthur retelling in modern times, so I'm excited to see what the author does with that. The next book is The Fairy Bargains on Prospect Hill. This I have had on my TBR for a while because I think that it kind of connects to the goblin market a little bit. It doesn't ever talk about goblins in the synopsis, but you have a family who lives on this hillside, and the people of the village have in the past bargained with fairies to get certain things. So they've given fairies something of theirs, coins or whatever, in order to have a good milking session with their cow, or like something small like that. And with the growth of society, this practice has been kind of forgotten, but the family that lives on this hill has remembered it. And I think the sister, there are 2 sisters that you follow in this family. You kind of follow their relationship with one another, and I believe one of the sisters goes missing, and the other one ends up having to make some bargains that are not necessarily great in order to get her sister back. So a little bit of the goblin market, which is like the bargaining aspect that I'm seeing, that I would like to know how that works, and if it does connect to the goblin market at all, or if it's just fairies, because I know fairies also have like lore about them bargaining and things like that and being tricksters. But yeah, I also absolutely love this cover. I think it's beautiful. Every time I see it at a Barnes & Noble, I want to pick it up, but I'm like, nope, I need to read it first. So it is on my TBR. The next book on my TBR is The Grace of Wild Things, I think is what it's called, which is by Heather Fawcett, who is the same author of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I wanted to read more by Heather Fawcett. I don't read a lot of middle grade, but I do think that this sounds interesting. In the synopsis it says, this is an inventive and fantastical reimagining of Anne of Green Gables with magic and witches that explores found family, loss, and the power of a girl's imagination. I just think it sounds really cute. It came out this year. It came out in February 14th, 2023. And yeah, I need a book by this author prior to the second book in Emily Wilde's. And so that is why this is on my TBR. I'm hoping to love it. The next book is The Hanging City. This was on my most recent Fantasy Genre Blends TBR. I still haven't gotten to it yet, but I am excited about it. It's a new release this year, and it is a fantasy romance. It features a girl who is on the run from her abusive father, and she is seeking refuge. None of the human civilizations that are left in the world will take her in, and so her last choice is to go to the Hanging City, which is a troll city. And it's very known in this society that humans and trolls do not get along. There, I guess, have been wars in the past, and so she's a little reluctant to go there because it's kind of like crossing a line, but she does have a little bit of a bargaining chip. She has a power that she can affect people's fear, and so she can make somebody afraid of things that they wouldn't originally be, or heighten their fear. It doesn't explain a ton about that power. It just talks about how it's a highly coveted power and one that a lot of people are a little scared of her for. and she can use this as a bargaining chip to essentially seek refuge in this troll city. There is a catch. She cannot use her power against any trolls, and she might potentially have to use them against humans. And so she kind of has to make this decision. I just think this sounds fantastic. Apparently there's a love story in it. There's someone within the city that she falls in love with. I don't know if this is another human or if she falls in love with a troll. When I first put this on my TBR, in my head, I was thinking this was about goblins, that it was a goblin city that she goes to, but it's definitely trolls when I read it now. So I'm not sure if I said that in my original fantasy genre blends, but it's not goblins, trolls, which I'm still stoked about. I think that it's going to be an interesting read. I don't think I've ever read a romance with trolls in it. So yeah, we'll see what the author does. The last fantasy standalone that I have on my TBR for this list, I'm sure needs no introduction, is Inkblood Sister Scribe. And I just am going to read you the first little paragraph of the synopsis because it just sucked me in. So this says, in this spellbinding debut, two estranged half-sisters tasked with guarding their family's library of magical books must work together to unravel a deadly secret at the heart of their collection. A tale of familial loyalty and betrayal and the pursuit of magic and power. I love stories about books, especially magical libraries. After reading The Book That Wouldn't Burn, I want more magical libraries in my life. And so I think this is going to be fantastic. A lot of people are talking about it. This is one that I do think I probably should have put on my fantasy predictions list for Goodreads, but we'll see on Tuesday if it ends up being on the list. But yeah, I definitely want to get to this at some point. If you all have any fantasy standalone recommendations, please put them in the comments down below. That way anyone who comes to this video just has a long list of books that they can add to their TBR if they just want a single fantasy book instead of a massive series. I would love to chat with you guys about your favorites in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.